Imagine, like, two local businesses. They're sitting on the exact same street.
Right.
They sell the exact same service, and they bring in the exact same revenue at the end of the year.
Okay, yeah.
Yet, one of those businesses ends up selling for $500,000, and the other one, literally the exact same revenue, sells for $5 million.
Wow. Yeah, it's a staggering gap.
It is. And today, we're opening up this massive, like a 150-page investor dossier to show you exactly why that happens, because, spoiler alert, the difference between those two numbers isn't the product, it's the paperwork.
It really is. And it all comes down to, well, the perceived risk of the person writing the check,
Exactly.
To an outside buyer or a bank,
Yeah.
a founder who runs the business purely on instinct and memory is, they're a liability.
A huge liability.
Right. It doesn't matter how much of a genius they are. If the magic is just locked up in their head, the business is practically worthless the moment they walk out the door.
Which is the exact black box we are demystifying for you on this deep dive. Whether you're actively building a business or looking to acquire one down the road, or even if you're just, curious about how these multi-million-dollar deals are structured behind closed doors, this is your ultimate blueprint.
It's a fascinating look under the hood.
It really is. We're going to examine a template created by business advisor John F. Hendershot. It's called the Investor Grade Business Portfolio.
And what Hendershot did here is he built this fully fleshed out, incredibly detailed case study for a fictional company.
Right.
Just to demonstrate what a business looks like when it's perfectly staged for a major capital investment or an outright sale. It is literally the gold standard for operational maturity.
So to bring this to life, we're looking at his avatar, Anchor HVAC Services, LLC.
Based in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Yep, Cincinnati. Founded in 2014, they've got 10 employees, and they're bringing in about $2.4 million in revenue.
A very solid small business.
Right. But before we get into the heavy math and the valuation stuff, we have to look at the very foundation of how this company is set up to actually survive, apart from its owner.
Yeah, that separation is key.
So we're introduced to Michael R. Thornton. He's the owner. He's 58 years old. He's tired, and he wants a 24 to 36-month exit window.
And that ticking clock is really what forces the discipline here.
Yeah.
Thornton has to prove that his company exists as a rigid, independent, legal entity. So it starts with, the most boring but totally critical documentation.
The compliance stuff.
Exactly. Anchor is registered as an Ohio single-member LLC. They clearly list their NAICS code, which is, the government classification system, as 238220.
Right.
And they have this thick folder containing every single active Ohio HVAC license and their EPA Section 608 certifications.
See, I always look at lists of compliance documents like that and my eyes just completely glaze over.
Oh, sure. It feels like bureaucratic box checking.
Yeah, exactly. But if you put yourself in the shoes of a private equity investor, that boring paperwork is actually a life preserver.
Oh, 100%.
Because a buyer looks at a missing EPA certification, and they don't just see a minor oversight. They see the potential for a massive retroactive federal fine.
A fine that could entirely wipe out their first year of operating profit.
Exactly. It's terrifying.
The visceral fear of unknown liabilities is what kills deals. So Thornton is neutralizing that fear up front.
Right.
But a buyer also isn't just buying what you did yesterday, right? They're paying for what the company will do tomorrow.
The future cash flow.
Exactly. And that requires a documented strategic plan. Anchor doesn't just, promise future growth vaguely. They lay out a highly specific 3-year roadmap to hit nearly $4 million by 2028.
Which is a big jump from 2.4.
It is. And they show the exact geographic expansion into neighboring Warren and Claremont counties. Plus, they outline this brand new indoor air quality or IAQ service line.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second. We are talking about highly sophisticated M&A strategies here. Deal structures, data rooms, growth capital.
Right.
Why did the author choose a 10-employee heating and cooling company for this case study? When people think of multi-million-dollar buyouts, they think of software startups in Silicon Valley, not, a guy fixing furnaces in Cincinnati.
Well, what's fascinating here is that Anchor HVAC was chosen very deliberately.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because it represents the quintessential acquisition target in the SBA 7A loan market.
Oh, okay.
Which is the standard government-backed loan program that most entrepreneurs and small investor groups use to buy everyday businesses.
Right, Main Street businesses.
Exactly. It's a highly fragmented market with massive volume. But here's the critical takeaway from the source. The industry itself is completely irrelevant.
So it wouldn't matter if it was a software company.
Not at all. The structural architecture of this 7-pillar portfolio applies equally to a specialized manufacturing plant, a regional accounting firm, or like a chain of dental clinics.
That makes total sense.
The numbers and the jargon change, but the underlying mechanics of proving transferable value are identical.
That actually brings up a great analogy.
Oh, let's hear it.
A business without this level of foundation documentation is essentially a legendary recipe that only lives in a master chef's head.
Oh, I like that.
Right. The food might be incredible today, but if the chef leaves, the restaurant dies instantly.
Nobody else knows how to make the sauce.
Exactly. So the act of documenting the legal structure, the licenses, and the growth strategy, it turns that mental recipe into a franchise manual. You're creating something that a complete stranger can step into and operate.
And once that franchise manual is poured and established, the investor's gaze shifts immediately to the absolute lifeblood of the company,
The money.
the revenue engine. They need to know exactly where the cash is coming from, and more importantly, how safe that cash is.
Right. So for Anchor HVAC, their cash engine is driven by 549 active customers.
That's a good base.
It is. And their mix is roughly 60% commercial work, 30% residential, and 10% new installations.
Okay.
But the documentation regarding their customer concentration is fascinating, mostly because of what it proves they don't do.
Yeah, customer concentration is, it's one of the quickest ways for an otherwise profitable deal to just completely fall apart.
Because it's too risky.
Exactly. If a business brings in $5 million a year, but 60% of that money comes from one single client, the business is essentially a hostage.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't think about it like that.
If that client changes management or goes out of business, the whole company collapses overnight.
But Anchor has insulated themselves from that completely. Their single largest client is the Cincinnati Children's Medical Building.
Which is a huge, prestigious account.
Massive, but it only accounts for 8% of their total revenue.
See, that's beautiful.
And if you look at their top 10 customers combined, it's just 41.2%. So even if their absolute biggest client fires them tomorrow, 92% of their cash flow is perfectly safe.
That is the textbook definition of de-risking the revenue.
Yeah.
But really, the crown jewel of their customer base is the structure of the contracts. They have 330 active service agreements, generating $1.38 million in annual recurring revenue, or ARR.
Now, I want to challenge this setup, though, based on the numbers in the document.
Sure.
If we look closely, the residential side of their business brings in about 400 customers.
Right.
The commercial side only brings in 150. Yet their strategic 3-year roadmap focuses heavily on commercial outreach. If I'm trying to grow a business, shouldn't I be fishing where the pond is most crowded? Like, why ignore the massive volume of residential homeowners?
That's a great question, but it comes down to the unit economics. Commercial contracts just function differently on a mechanical level. First off, they're legally binding, multi-year agreements. Anchor's average commercial contract term is 1.8 years.
Okay, so it's guaranteed work.
Guaranteed. And second, the dollar values are significantly higher. Their premium commercial tier charges over $14,000 a year.
Oh, wow.
Right? A homeowner might call you once every 3 years for a $200 repair. A commercial property manager is locked in for routine, high-dollar preventative maintenance.
Okay, I'm wrestling with this a bit, but I think I see the angle. The buyer isn't just looking for hustle. They're essentially trying to purchase an annuity.
That's exactly it.
They want predictable, boring cash flow. Relying on a homeowner's furnace to break down randomly during a January blizzard is totally unpredictable.
It's basically gambling.
Right. But locking a hospital into a 2-year, $14,000 maintenance schedule is bankable.
Completely bankable. And that predictability drastically lowers the risk profile, which makes a bank much more willing to finance the acquisition.
Which is the whole goal.
Exactly. And that actually leads us out of the top-line revenue metrics and down into the actual financial engine. Because it's one thing to say the company bills $2.4 million a year.
Right.
It is entirely another to prove how much of that cash actually drops into the owner's pocket.
Yes. This is where we go from the vanity metrics to the absolute bottom line truth.
That's the fun part.
So for 2025, Anchor shows that $2.42 million in revenue with a really healthy 49% gross margin,
Very healthy.
and their EBITDA sits at $518,800.
Now, let's define EBITDA quickly because it's the fulcrum of business valuation.
Please do.
It stands for earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization.
A mouthful.
Yeah, but buyers use this metric instead of just standard net profit
Good.
because a new owner will have a completely different tax burden and loan structure than the current owner.
Oh, that makes sense.
Right, so they strip out the current owner's debt and tax baggage to see the pure underlying cash-generating power of the business itself.
But the EBITDA isn't the final number they use to negotiate the sale price, right?
No, it's not.
Because, as anyone who's ever owned a small business knows, owners run a lot of, well, let's call them creative lifestyle expenses through the company books.
Oh, absolutely. And this is the great friction point in every small business acquisition. It introduces the concept of add-backs.
Okay, add backs?
The goal here is to calculate the seller's discretionary earnings, or SDE. And Anchor's SDE is actually significantly higher than their EBITDA. It sits at over $623,000.
So, and the portfolio gives us some incredibly colorful real-world examples of how they get to that higher number.
The classic examples.
They are. They add back the owner's $9,200 lease on a Mercedes G-Wagon because he admits it's 60% personal use.
Right.
They add back $18,000 for his spouse, who is technically on the payroll but doesn't actually have an operational role in the company.
Very common.
And they include a one-time $12,000 software conversion fee that won't happen again.
The mechanism at play here is normalization. The seller is essentially showing the buyer the true financial reality. They're saying, hey, when you take over, you aren't going to be paying my spouse's ghost salary, and you aren't paying for my SUV.
Right.
So that cash won't be an expense for you. It will remain in your bank account as pure profit.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. If I am the buyer sitting across the negotiating table, I am deeply suspicious of these add-backs.
Naturally.
Because small business tax returns are notoriously designed to legally minimize profit so the owner pays fewer taxes.
Yep.
Now, suddenly, the owner is doing a total reversal, pointing at all their expenses and saying, actually, look how secretly profitable I am. Isn't this just an artificial way to pad the numbers and inflate the sale price?
That suspicion is completely warranted. And I mean, it kills deals every single day.
I bet.
A buyer looks at an add back for, security expenses and realizes it's just the owner writing off their dog's vet bills.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. This is exactly why the portfolio introduces a critical tool called a Quality of Earnings Report, or Q of E. Anchor commissioned an independent CPA firm, Reynolds Transaction Advisory, to conduct one.
So how does a quality of earnings report differ from just, I don't know, handing the buyer 3 years of tax returns and an income statement?
Well, a tax return tells the IRS a very specific story based on tax code loopholes.
Yeah.
A QV is an intense forensic audit specifically designed for a transaction.
Okay.
The independent CPA goes into the company's bank accounts and verifies every single transaction. They prove that the revenue claimed actually hit the bank account, and they mathematically validate that those add-backs are legitimate.
Wow, so it's bulletproof.
Exactly. It transforms trust me accounting into an investor-grade, bank-financeable balance sheet. It completely neutralizes the buyer's suspicion.
Okay, so the financials, backed by the Q of E, prove the business makes solid money today.
Right.
But if I'm handing over $3 million, how do I know the whole operation doesn't immediately collapse tomorrow when the founder, Michael Thornton, is sitting on a beach in Florida? I mean, the money only matters if the business survives the transition.
Which is why the documentation of operations and risk management is the true barrier to entry for a premium valuation. Anchor presents 12 core standard operating procedures, completely documented.
12 SOPs.
Yeah, and they cover every major process, from how a dispatcher handles an emergency service call, to the safe handling of refrigerant, to the exact step-by-step process for onboarding a new commercial hospital contract.
They also heavily feature their org chart in this section.
Yes, that's crucial.
They spotlight a lead technician named David Chen. He handles the field operations, he conducts the technical training, and he oversees the safety protocols. And by heavily documenting David's role, the owner is proving to the buyer that the technical expertise is decentralized. The founder is not the only person who knows how to fix a chiller system. They're demonstrating real management depth.
And surrounding that management depth is a heavy layer of risk mitigation. Anchor maintains a remarkably clean OSHA 300 log.
Which is rare in that industry.
Very. In 5 full years of operating heavy machinery, they only record one minor strain injury back in 2022. They also include a 14-page disaster recovery plan and a $1 million cyber liability policy.
To me, looking at this level of operational and risk documentation, it's exactly like buying a used car.
How so?
It's the difference between the seller tossing me the keys and saying, "She runs great, you'll love it," versus a seller handing me a 5-year hyper-detailed third-party verified maintenance log.
Oh, that tracks every oil change and brake pad replacement.
Exactly. I might buy the first car, but I'm going to demand a massive discount because of the unknown risks. But I will gladly pay a premium for the second car because the risk has been eliminated on paper.
Well, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, let's look at the mathematical reality of that analogy.
Okay.
Anchor highlights their workers' compensation experience modifier, which sits at 0.92.
And the industry baseline is 1.0, right?
Correct. So a modifier under 1 means their insurance premiums literally cost less than their competitors because their safety record is proven.
Wow, so that savings drops straight to the bottom line.
Straight to profit. But more importantly, when a buyer sees all this, the safety record, the disaster plans, the fact that all 3 senior staff members have 12-month, 50-mile radius non-compete agreements.
Oh, the non-competes are huge.
Huge. They perceive a highly stable asset. In the M&A world, lower perceived risk directly results in a higher purchase price multiple. You are financially compensated for being organized.
That is the ultimate payoff, which brings all these individual pieces, the legal foundation, the customer concentration, the Q of E, the risk mitigation. It brings it all together into the final step, staging the sale.
The deal package.
Exactly. It's the actual package you take out into the market to ask for money.
And in this specific fictional scenario, they aren't actually looking for an outright buyout just yet.
Right. They're raising funds.
The ask in their pitch deck is a $750,000 growth capital raise. They want an investor to fund that Warren County expansion and the new IAQ service line we discussed at the very beginning.
And because their documentation is totally flawless, they get to dictate the terms.
Yep.
With their adjusted EBITDA sitting at $525,000, they can confidently command a 4.5 to 5.0 market multiple. That places the company value somewhere between $2.4 million and $3 million.
And the sophistication even extends to how they share this information with potential investors. They don't just, email a massive zip file of PDFs.
That would be a nightmare.
It would. They utilize a virtual data room, specifically using a platform called ShareFile, which features granular access logs.
Wait, so it tracks who is looking at what?
Down to the minute. Anchor can see that an interested party, like the fictional Sterling Capital Partners, spent 20 minutes looking at the financial projections, but totally ignored the employee handbook.
Oh, that's brilliant.
It gives the seller incredible leverage because they understand the specific anxieties or interests of the buyer before they ever even sit down for a negotiation.
So what does this all mean for the listener?
Right.
If I own a business or I manage a large department, do I really need all 150 of these highly technical documents ready to go on day one? Because honestly, looking at the sheer volume of this portfolio, it feels completely paralyzing.
Yeah, the author leaves us with a very practical warning about exactly that feeling. The volume is the entire point. You need a clear vision of the destination.
Yeah.
But it is emphatically not built in a day.
Okay, that's a relief.
Hendershot notes that it takes an average of 12 to 24 months of highly disciplined, systematic preparation to close the gap between a standard, slightly chaotic operating business and a highly valued, investor-grade asset.
So it's a process.
It is a long-term marathon of just getting things out of your head and onto paper.
I think distilling this entire blueprint down, the lesson is incredibly encouraging. A premium business valuation does not require you to invent a breakthrough tech product.
No, not at all.
It doesn't require $100 million in top-line revenue. Anchor HVAC fixes air conditioners in Ohio. Their immense value comes entirely from their operational maturity.
Right.
It comes from documenting their processes and deliberately de-risking the future for an investor.
They transition their value from the fleeting instincts of the founder into the permanent documented structure of the business itself.
And even if you aren't looking to sell a company or secure an exit anytime soon, operating with this level of clarity makes any professional endeavor dramatically less stressful. Having your processes documented and knowing exactly where your risk lies makes you incredibly resilient to market chaos.
Whether you're a sole proprietor or a mid-level manager inside a massive corporation, treating your division like an investor-grade asset makes your daily life infinitely easier.
With that in mind, I want to leave you with a provocative thought to ponder as you jump back into your day.
Let's hear it.
Think about your own daily work right now, or the department you run. If an outside auditor walked into your office tomorrow, how much of your actual value is locked entirely inside your own head?
That's a scary thought.
It is. If you had to prove your personal quality of earnings and transfer your exact role to a complete stranger in the next 30 days, what add-backs and what SOPs would you need to put on paper right now to prove your true worth? Are you running on instinct or are you building a franchise? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.